Thank you for coming, everybody. I'm going to turn off the AI flamenco band. We're still letting a few people in, and we're going to be starting in a minute. There. Thanks for. We've actually had a lot of interest in this event. I'm very excited about this event myself. And I mean, we've been talking about um, health AI development, various aspects of it. I did a webinar. I started, I think, at the beginning of this year. I did a health AI and compliance webinar. I've done various aspects of it, and the conversation around this has changed um, throughout the year, and that's one of the things that's coming up more and more often is the trust issue, and we're going to be addressing that today. And what we're going to do is we're going to be talking about it from lots of different points. So we have 5 speakers. Each speaker has a very different background. So we're going to be talking about this issue from lots of different POVs. A lot of takeaways from this. If you have a question, don't wait for the Q&A. Put it in the chat. And if we can't get to all the questions, we will follow up with you after the event. Now, that's enough of me. If we could bring on our first, let's see, speaker. Hello, Jacob.
Hi, Jose. Hi,
Thanks for
everyone.
coming.
My pleasure.
And I wonder if you can start us off by introducing yourself.
Absolutely. I'm a medical doctor. I spent almost a decade in the emergency department, did a master's in disaster medicine, and I was always intrigued by technology, the transformative nature it has in healthcare. Made a pivot in the last few years. I'm doing my best to upskill, data analytics, AI, informatics, because I believe that a clinician's role in health tech is essential. Their perspective, their ability to help on the user experience, they understand compliance and in a sense as a translator between business and the tech side. So I do work as fractional chief medical officers and consulting for health techs. I work with the WMA, World Medical Association, with the medical tech working group, where we are working how AI impacts physicians around the world in terms of and supporting them in terms of webinars and policy.
It's very interesting that you said that. I actually just saw today one of my previous speakers. Um, so one of the speakers who previous on one of our I shouldn't say that she's my speaker. She said she put a post today. 30% of all data produced is in healthcare, and almost all of it is kind of locked away. Separately from that, the key to unlocking that data are the clinicians. There's no going around them. There you can't. So I'm glad you mentioned that. That is something I'm seeing more and more often. That to develop health AI, you have
Mhm.
to get the clinicians in early
Yeah.
at the data stage. You can't just say, "Oh, we've got a product. Here it is. What do you think?" It's too late, and it's also detrimental to the training of the AI if you don't have that clinical POV in that data that you're just shoving into a model. The
Mhm.
costs go up, the accuracy of the model goes down, all kinds of problems present themselves. So I'm monologuing. I shouldn't be doing that. um, this is the question. That's a comment. That's not a question. Um, now I want you to start us off, and this is the kind of the big. This is the big question that hangs over everything. A lot of patients and actually clinicians as well, are curious but cautious
Mhm.
about AI in healthcare. A lot of people didn't ask for it. So we
Mhm.
didn't ask for this, and now it's coming. Um, would you say that's accurate from your experience? And if so, what do the people producing or deploying these solutions need to do to earn that trust?
Yeah, it's absolutely accurate, Jose. Right now, if I can take a step back and just paint a picture, what happens right now in clinical practice, I may have a patient. They come into the office, the examining room with an issue. They ask me and they allow me, who is a complete stranger, to ask them deeply personal questions. They answer me, they tell me things they may not even tell their closest partner. They allow me to physically touch them, to examine them, sometimes in intimate areas. They allow me this. Why? Because they trust me. And why do they trust me? Why do they trust clinicians? Why do they trust healthcare providers? Because of the process that has happened. It's not overnight that we've become a doctor or we've been entered into the room. There has been training that's gone through medical school, then you enter to residency, you're evaluated. At each point, that trust is being built up by this process. Like, for example, if we take a new device when we have something coming into the emergency department, like a new ultrasound, the patient has to know that I use it well and I know it. I spent time before understanding every knob, every action. So once I have a confidence as a clinician, that translates, I believe that translates to the patient as well. They need to see that we have, as a physician, we have confidence, that we have the expertise. They need to know that there is someone responsible for their care, a person, rather than outsourcing it to some tool. I'm all for healthcare AI for the digital transformation of healthcare, but it's not a replacement. And we were just talking about this in an earlier meeting in the WMA. It's about augmentation. We are augmenting our intelligence. We're using these tools so that we can have better patient outcomes. We can have better processes. And it's only once we have done this that, AI really proves its reliability through the process. Because as clinicians, we have a process. We have checks and balances. And it's only through that and how it integrates into the patient care can it earn the trust that is essential for widespread adoption. Anything less than that will be insufficient.
It's interesting you said that. I think, and I think what gets a lot of people's backs up
Mm.
is in during the peak hype cycle, they're saying, "Oh, we're getting rid of everybody. AI is going to do it,"
Mhm.
and which is actually over promising, and it's the technology. And actually, I've heard a science fiction writer, American science fiction writer, said it's not a replacement; it's a prosthesis
Mhm.
that extends the capability of the person.
Mhm.
And and part of the problem is saying artificial intelligence instead of model. We say AI. A lot of the people who are actually involved in the technology, they just use the term model in private. And so people think it's replacing somebody, but it's not.
Mhm.
And thank you for that. And I'm gonna ask you one more question, and then uh, now here we've actually had two webinars ago.
Mhm.
A lot of clinicians speak to being overwhelmed with technology. I've got 20 different systems, Jose. They don't
Yeah.
talk to each other.
Mhm.
You don't give me another one. And how health AI doesn't always, and also you also say health AI, these solutions, they don't always address our needs.
Mhm.
So, what advice would you give to companies on that front?
Yeah. Brilliant question, Jose. And you actually answered this in the beginning of the session. Build with clinicians from the beginning. Don't come in later on. And I'm not saying it because we control or we only can understand. But you use us, utilize our experience because I have sat with patients. hundreds of possibly thousands of patients over time, understanding them, hearing different perspectives, how I fit into the ecosystem in my specialty versus other specialities, how different diseases affect, the patient coming in and the level that we assign to them, and all of these workflows. It's so important that, build with them, with us, with clinicians from the beginning, not afterwards, not as a post hoc sort of thought, at every step early in the design process. So this helps you, like what a clinician will bring in is when you're doing your needs assessment, they can bring in that perspective, because what happens, and this has happened when I've, spoken with health tech solution providers, is many times a person with a brilliant idea comes in and they perhaps have had their experience, but not every patient is the same. Not every diabetic is the same. Not every hypertensive is the same. If hypertensive patient is the same. There are different requirements. They come from different backgrounds, different socioeconomic statuses, different family support structures. So all of those things take into account, we can then start to make a personalized care plan. So I don't like to use the word customer journey, but at the end, this is like health techs are in the business. They need to make a return on on their investment. So understanding your customer journey, or your patients or your healthcare provider, or who the stakeholder is, and how each player in that journey interacts, understanding the workflow, understanding at each assessment, at each point, are we overcomplicating? Trust me, if you are giving another tool in addition to the other tools that clinicians already use, it's not going to get adopted. It will not be used because you're just adding on. Do you solve a problem, or are you creating new ones? That's a question that you need to ask yourselves. Developers need to ask themselves. So I would say four things. The American Medical Association, they did a study in 2016 and they found four requirements that I think applies to this as well. What in terms of when companies develop or implement health AI, does it work? And I would add, does it work safely? Because doctors need proof. Will it work in my practice? So a person who's working in a multi-tier tertiary care hospital is different than someone who has a small clinic in a rural setting. There are different practices and different workflows. So they need tools to fit into that, into their existing workflows. Like practicality is key. And then we have to think about payment and liability. Right now, liability is a huge question because tools are being implemented. But what if the health AI tool makes a mistake? What if it hallucinates? What if it tells me to do or does something that I have not told it to do, and it overprescribes a medication, or doesn't order something, or whichever tool or purpose it was made for? So that's a big thing. And we need to hold trust very, very preciously, because we can understand this across the board, not just in health AI, but in life. Once you've lost trust, it is difficult to go back. And once a physician or clinician has lost trust in a certain tool, it makes adoption so much more difficult the next round. And that's happened. I've seen that happen firsthand as well. So human in the loop, HIL, is a key thing. With AI, with the decision making, having them together. So developers must build with the clinicians, not just for them. And I truly believe anything less, you will fail to gain traction.
It's very interesting. We had what you just said there. I had a webinar way back where, and I know just from a purely software engineering
Mhm.
perspective, software engineering teams that bring on the clinicians early, they reduce their costs massively, and they improve their adoption, and they go to market much more efficiently. Whereas if you just build, if they just kind of build off to the side, and then and then get confronted
Mhm.
by all the things you just said to me, and then they have to go back
Mhm.
and change the architecture, that doubles, triples, quadruples the cost.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Now, Dave, I'm gonna send you away, but don't leave us. We're bringing you back for the Q&A.
definitely. My
Thank
pleasure.
thank you very much for that. And I'm going to move spotlight. Now I'm going to bring on one of my coworkers. You haven't yet. I think you've spoken at two of our webinars before. And I am going to, there you go. Hello.
Hello, Jose.
I wonder if you could introduce you. I know I just introduced you a little bit, but could you introduce yourself properly?
Sure. My name is Eugenia. Hello, everybody. I'm a UX designer at Radency. I work at the same company with Jose, which is a pleasure. And my specialization as a UX designer is creating digital interfaces. And as a UX designer, it doesn't mean that I only create visuals or I choose the color for buttons. I create interfaces, and I make sure that interface is easy to use for users, it's understandable, it's clear, and I ensure that user journey is seamless, that interface solves user's problem, and also important that it meets business goals. So I am all in. I agree with Jacob that we need to build interfaces with our users, with doctors, with patients. And this is my job to ensure that it is built in the right way using all the feedback that we can get, and that their journey, user's journey is seamless, and that the interface solves their users' problems. And thank you, Jose, for this webinar. I'm excited to be here, and I'm always glad to share something.
And I know as a UX designer, just so people, because a lot of people don't know, you're often the very first person involved in a project at the proof of concept stage. You're building that proof of concept, so you're actually almost like the first person in, even before the software engineering team gets involved. I want to ask
Yes.
you. I don't normally do this, but I want to ask you the same question, and I normally hate it when webinar hosts do this, but I'm going to do it. About building trust in health AI, people are curious but cautious. From a UX design perspective, what do designers, is this something that designers can address? And if so, how?
Yes, absolutely. It might be the same question, but the answer will be different because it's from different perspective. And of course, AI is now integrating in digital interfaces, and of course, it can be helpful. But there's also fear of the unknown, fear of mistakes, and especially fear about data privacy. And the good news is that using the right design tools, we can address all of those. And first and foremost is making the AI understandable. We always talk about trust in this case, and it's the first thing to do is to explain to users clearly how it works, why it works that way. And instead of presenting results as mysterious AI magic to our users, we need to explain things clearly and to explain how AI came to that conclusion. Maybe it analyzed the user's heart rate, sleep patterns, or daily activity, or the results are based on this number of similar cases. And to just give more practical inputs, we can show it all in the interface using info boxes and saying that based on your recent sleep data or any other data, here's the suggestion to improve your well-being. So the key here is transparency. If users understand how AI works, they're less likely to feel suspicious, or they are more likely to trust our interface. And of course, the huge concern is privacy, especially when it comes to health data, because users share a lot of data with us. And if they don't feel that this data is secure, they will not trust the AI. And from a design perspective, we need to make it visible and manageable. And we don't need to hide crucial information in these long privacy policies sections. We need to communicate all of this clearly and give users clear options, any simple UI element like toggles, checkboxes, so that they can decide which data they share and with whom. It can be, and also we need to communicate clearly the value of all of those, so they will understand why they share it, what they'll have in return for it, and they need to feel that they're in control of all of this. And this is also the key to building trust. And also, I talk about this all the time. We need to understand who our users are, if they're patients or doctors or some management team members. And when we understand who our users are, then we can use the language to address them. It usually should be plain, non-technical language. It is our job to make the AI clear to our users and to simplify it. So for example, if our users are patients and we spot the elevated blood pressure, we don't need to overwhelm them with medical terms. We just say that your blood pressure is a bit higher and here is what you can do with it. And so making sure that we communicate with users in a simple language, we make them feel that AI is a helpful companion and not just a decision maker. And also, users will be more likely to trust us if we show that those are proven results. So my good friend once put it very simply to me: when you go to one doctor, you trust one opinion. When you ask AI, you trust hundreds and hundreds of similar cases, and you can just rely on statistics. And if we help users to see it that way, they are again more likely to trust us. So we can just put this evidence right into the interface. For example, when we can show testimonials, and studies or data that backs up the AI recommendations. So for example, if we give some health tip, we can show that this tip is based on this many cases, or 98% of users who followed this advice improved this parts of their healthcare experience. And so this is the key. It's about making the AI transparent, about focusing on privacy and speaking in simple terms to our users and showing proven results. And then our users will build trust in AI, and it can become an ally in improving their health.
I think I posted a clip yesterday by Julian Kervala, who talks about this as respect the value and be discreet, don't be pushy. But I want to see if I can. Thank you so much for that, Yehevnia. I'm going to send you away, but please stay with us. And I'm going to go boom. And I know we've got a couple of questions in the chat. We're going to get to them. But I got to warn you, Linda, we are not covering cybersecurity in this event. I am going to be doing an event on cybersecurity, and I've got some information I can send you on LinkedIn afterwards about that. But there's some good news on the cybersecurity and AI front. But we don't have a cybersecurity expert on the panel. We're not actually talking about that. But now I could bring on Tony. I'm gonna spotlight you. Let's see. Hello. I can't remember. Do I call you Tony Marie or do I call you Tony?
Tony Marie is good.
Tony Marie. Thank you for coming. And my mom's Anna Marie, but she hates it if you say the Marie. So you have to say Anna. And so I'm always like, I have to ask. Thanks so much for coming. And I mentioned you in the last event, and I didn't mention you by name, but I told people what you do, and you became a lot of people are excited about it. And I'm wondering if you could introduce yourself.
Absolutely. So my name is Tony Marie Gordon. I'm a sociology PhD. I focus on race, culture, and health policy specifically. And in my postgraduate career, I've really specifically been focused on the digital transformation of health and health innovation and what that means on a societal level and the ethical dimensions of that. I'm currently working as an independent researcher, writer, and consultant, looking at these issues from a few different vantage points.
And a lot of people are very interested, and I think I'm going to do the annoying thing of saying this is more of a comment than a question, but when it comes to compliance, and expectations, things are very different now. And when we had, you have HIPAA in the United States, here in the EU, we have GDPR, and Europe brought in this regulation, and then there was a grace period, and then it was several years, maybe 6 years after the regulation came in, that people started talking about it, started saying, oh, wait a minute, that's a violation of GDPR. They've not used my data correctly. With the AI, there's no 6-year grace period, and people are not talking about the legislation. They're concerned about the ethics of this, and they're not waiting, for an answer. They're going to raise the question up immediately. And I follow the AI. There's an AI ethics debate that's just constantly raging on Twitter, and a lot of people are getting increasingly angry about it. And it's not. Most of it's not health AI. A lot of it's other parts of the AI, generative AI, but companies can't afford to, and that's one of the reasons why I brought you on. I wanted your point of view. A lot of people in the audience need to hear this. You can't just wait 6 years and figure it out later, because your stakeholders are going to bring it up before then. They're already bringing it up. So I'm wondering if you could, from your POV, and talk to us about the ethics of health AI and how that is impacting people's trust. And you don't have to think about it from a marketing perspective. You can stay within your expertise. What should people know who are, I guess you're addressing two types of people here: people who are developing health AI solutions, and then you've got people on the clinical side that are like, okay, we're taking this on board, we're going to be implementing it, and we're trying to learn a bit more about it.
That's an excellent question, Jose. And I'm always excited to have the opportunity to discuss these things with people who are either providers or folks in the tech space who really shape what health tech looks like in a number of ways, as we've already discussed. I think one of the most important things to foreground this type of conversation is really understanding that when it comes to vulnerable communities, especially my work centers on the US, looking at people who are marginalized and communities of color, they already have an earned mistrust of the medical system and of the worlds of science and technology. And that goes back many, many years. Some of the examples that I give pretty regularly is like the extraction of Henrietta Lacks cells without her knowledge or consent, and how we use HeLa cells within science, even though Henrietta Lacks herself received very substandard medical care and tragically died of cervical cancer very early in her life. The Tuskegee syphilis experiments, devices that don't work well for people of color, like pulse oximeters, and the kind of devastation that caused during COVID-19 pandemic, and more recent instances of algorithmic bias. So it's really kind of fueling that conversation that you were talking about, where people feel like there's something unfair going on here. They need to be aware of what's happening in this space. And there are more people actually kind of doing organizing around these issues. So that's the most important thing, is like, it's not only an issue of building trust, but it's also an issue in some instances of repairing this relationship with parts of the public. Another thing that I wanted to talk about, just listening to the other speakers, is also what that research and design process looks like when it comes to those groups who have been negatively impacted in the past. And so people are doing a lot of really good work and research to really delve into what does community-centered participatory research and other participatory research paradigms look like. Kind of thinking about patient-led research paradigms as well, and equitable design practices. So really kind of thinking about the people who are most at risk, and also thinking about the people who are often left out of these processes and don't have a voice and don't have their needs prioritized or centered. Like, how can you bring those folks in so that what we have is a more equitable result?
That's very interesting. I think a lot of people have to change their. And I talk to people developing health AI solutions, and where they start engaging with users and kind of a little bit too late in the process, and they're like, oh, okay, but traditionally, when you do software development, I used to work in the game industry. A lot of people in digital health come from the gaming industry. You create your program, you finish it, and okay, now you give it to somebody to test it. Does it work? Yes or no? Okay. Are there any bugs? Yes or no? And but health is way more sophisticated than a word processor. It's more intimate, or a computer game. And the experience, the context of who that person, and Jacob talked about this, the context of who that person is matters. And so a lot of, I'm commenting again. I told myself I wouldn't do that. But I want to ask you a question. And I know this might be a bit outside your expertise. This came in from the audience. Let's see. I think you are correct in working with clinicians. However, we are building a mental well-being platform. We approached psychologists who wouldn't talk with us as they thought we'd be trying to take their jobs. How do you get over this AI stigma in health? This is not really your field, though, is it, Tony? And I know you're talking about repairing trust. How do we get people over? And I guess, how do we get people over the stigma? And maybe getting people over the stigma is maybe not the right wording. Not
Absolutely. I think Jacob would probably be better suited to answer the question about kind of getting clinicians involved. I know that there is a lot going on in terms of, ethics at a societal level, and how AI is restructuring the workforce. And there is a lot of anxiety around that. So I have run into that as well. But one of the things that you were talking about, Jose, I wanted to come back to this question of like, where do users come in? And this question about deployment. I think that that's really important to talk about, especially within the context of AI, because we've already seen that models that are trained on a certain type of data, so say the data is not representative, it just won't work for the people it wasn't trained for. And there's no easy fixes once you've already kind of made those errors really early in the process. And, it's also important with devices or technologies that are relying on unsupervised learning, and the amount that they can change or fluctuate. Something might seem equitable and fair and like it works for all of the different stakeholders at one point in time. And then that might not be the case. So there's also kind of like, when it comes to maintaining trust, there's also these issues of, governance and kind of continuing to bring people in and to monitor how effectively the tech works for different folks.
And you can't ask the AI, are you biased? It can't say that. And it will internalize the biases in the training data, and you have to find out if there is a bias. You're going to find out the hard way. I mean, there's one example, and this is not touching on what you want. A lot of tumors, a lot of images of tumors, a doctor's holding up a ruler next to the tumor. So now a lot of diagnostic AIs, if they see a straight line, they go, oh, that's a tumor. But it won't explain that reasoning when it gives its result. And it's you have to know in advance. You have to address this in advance with the biases. And that's a whole other topic. But thank you so much. I'm going to send you away. Please stay with us. Thank you so much for coming, by the way. It's brilliant. And we're going to bring her back. And now we're going to bring Evelyn. I think you're the first person I talked to when I was producing this webinar.
Hi.
Hi. And do you mind introducing yourself and what you do? Because you're a little bit different. We've not had anybody like you before on one of our, and I've been to your webinars, so I'm quite familiar, but the audience isn't.
Well, my name is Evelyn Rizza. I'm based in the States. My clinical background is in rehabilitation science, specifically working with people with mobility issues, amputations, etc. And there was just so many great new technology pieces to that weren't getting covered by insurance. I went and got a master's degree in health economics. So I've been working in the evidence space, building up evidence to ensure that patients have access to these technologies, helping small med tech companies and even pharma in some cases build their evidence up so that we have the tools we need to get these products to the patients. And that just means the evidence that insurance uses to cover these things.
Thanks for that. I'm wondering, Evelyn, if you could comment. Do you feel comfortable commenting on what some of the other speakers have said?
I would love to. I'll just go kind of backwards. Tony Marie had mentioned about the trust and the mistrust in the healthcare system, and I saw that when I worked in practice too. People come from a lot of different backgrounds, so they're they could or could not be receptive to technologies based on their backgrounds. And it's important to respect and understand where people come from when it comes to technology, be it their race or even age, gender. These can all affect how receptive they are to technologies. Just today, I was reading an article about how these AI systems were being trained on patient scans without their consent, from ER. So those kind of stories are going to further enforce the mistrust that patients may have, not only in the healthcare system, but also in the development of these technologies. So it's super important that we come in at the ground level when developing these technologies with patient trust in mind, making sure that from an ethics standpoint, we are getting the consent, that we are including the patient voices and the clinician voices as we develop these technologies.
I want to talk to you. I want you to talk about the evidence piece, because I know, and I've heard you speak a lot about using new technologies to manage, distribute, collate, access clinical evidence or scientific evidence. Very exciting stuff. And I don't think, and most people haven't even heard any of this. I'm wondering if you could speak to that. What role does evidence have in building trust? And if you can share some of that, some of the new things that are happening in that space.
Right. I think that people rely on intuition when they come with healthcare solutions. You know, they think it's intuitive that I see a nursing shortage. I need to develop something that replaces a component of nursing care, and that'll make everything better. But then we look at like, what is the evidence of that? You know, some of these technologies get implemented in healthcare settings to monitor patients. And I've never met a nurse that prefers to sit in a room looking just at television screens. So maybe they didn't look at the user, the nurses in this standpoint. And then we're taking away the human touch too. So some of these technologies, what I review when I look at these kind of technologies are, there's things like time and motion studies. So that's something that if we are saving time and money at a hospital, time and motion studies are something that a developer or a med tech company could say, this is how we're saving, and this is how money can be saved in this healthcare setting. So will that help the patient? That's to me the most important piece. Then we have to look at patient outcomes. Sometimes the patients save money too. Maybe they're not in a hospital as long, and they don't have to pay as much. But these things should be quantified so that patients can see the direct benefit of these technologies being implemented in their healthcare systems. Locally, as an example, our local hospital is being bought by a VC firm, which is venture capital, and their motives, the owner wrote a book about this, is how they're going to be implementing all these technologies. My community is very upset about this. So they don't understand. It looks like they're cutting costs, cutting people. And in a lot of times that is what happens. People get cut, jobs aren't replaced, and they're implementing technologies to kind of fill in the voids that are being left as the healthcare workers leave. So communicating patient outcomes under these situations is super important. We had people come from the hospitals, they set up in our community, they answered people's questions. But what they didn't say is how patients' outcomes are affected by these measures. So maybe they just didn't bother to bring it up. Maybe people didn't ask the right questions, but these are really important things to communicate and study during and after implementing these technologies.
We get the same thing in the software engineering space, and I'll be doing a post about this later. Innovation austerity. A lot of these tech companies have laid off a lot of their technology staff, thinking, oh, we'll replace them with AI later, not necessarily knowing how we're going to do that, and then finding out, oh, that doesn't work. And now we're falling behind. Oh, we got to hire them back now. But now we also demoralized everybody. And it's unfortunate. It was driven by, and it's often driven by a financing from just lay people off, and then you'll figure out how to replace them with AI. And that has been a recipe for disaster. I think we're going to be hearing more about that over the next year, and a lot of organizations, in a lot of cases, the CEO is like, I hate this, but my shareholders are demanding it. Sorry, I know we're going to change our mind next year, but I have to do it. And sorry, that's more of a comment than a question again. But thank you so much for that, Evelyn. I'm going to send you away and bring you on for the Q&A. It was great having you on.
Thanks.
And remove spotlight. And now, our final speaker. Hello.
Hello,
Anastasia.
and all. Hi.
Thank you so much for coming. And I'm wondering if you could, and I know you've actually got quite a large following on Twitter, and but a lot of people in the audience may not necessarily know you, so if you can introduce yourself.
Sure. So my name is Anastasia Markvarde, and I'm actually based in Finland, Helsinki, and my background is in innovation and startup ecosystem development. I've worked in a couple of countries of Europe, helping develop startup initiatives and helping entrepreneurs. And for the last more than 4 years, I'm working with Eversana, which is a global life provider of services, full service for life science industry, and on the agency side, helping companies develop innovations and innovative products, and on the entrepreneur and startup side, running an acceleration program for early stage digital health startups.
Thank you. And I'm wondering, do you mind commenting on what some of the other speakers have said? Are you okay? Are you okay to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. Because my main thought, actually, because we've talked about the topic more from the perspective of, product or clinician, but I'd like to bring entrepreneurial perspective into this conversation. And my main thought was like, how much do entrepreneurs need to think about nowadays with all this digital component added to their businesses? So if you think about still pretty near future where digital didn't exist, and if you would invent a medical device, for example, you would just need to, well, invent it, patent, and get a CE mark, and then, sell it, which you still have to do nowadays. But currently, you have to take care of all big component of, of course, handling the data and, processing it and following all the guidelines. And on this one, by the way, I agree with the speakers about, being very straightforward and upfront with the users, and, instead of having the long policies that, let's be honest, very few people read, you ask the consent upfront. But then also, there is not just that. If you think about it more as a strategy, you need to be consistent with your strategy all along the way. So, for example, even if you're a founder, people are aware of what you're posting on LinkedIn and about your comments. People are aware of what you're saying at the events like yours here today, the webinars, and you need to think of all this together. So that's quite a big work. And again, if we talk about scientific side, I also totally agree that of course science and scientific validation helps to clearly talk to your patients and say like, yeah, hey, this is validated. But also, I think it's very important to think about it from the perspective of the whole industry and even a bit outside the industry. So, for example, all of us here, we work in digital health or like innovation, and we know what it is. If we take some group of patients, I don't know, in some specific populations or countries or outside the cities or, different age groups, they don't even know what digital health is. And to them, it might sound, like a bit of like a Bitcoin or something. And if you've been working for this for a really long time, you don't realize that you build your communication on something that you're using in your everyday lives. What you have to actually think about is how different people would look into that one from their perspectives. So that's one thing. And from that point of view, you get the whole other layer of work to do, which is actually contribute to the development of the ecosystem as well, and contribute into positioning digital health or specific segment where you're working as a trustworthy industry. So that's really a lot.
Excellent. Let's see how. So you've actually, I think you've already addressed the question I was going to ask you. What advice you have for early stage startups that are trying to build trust into their solutions? And this language is important because a lot of people will say, how do we get them to get over or forget their concerns? That's not the right way to think about it. You don't go around it. So you hear a lot of people talking about considering compliance early, and we've talked about in that webinar, is that enough to build trust? Or, and I know you've already touched on this in your comments, is there something else that they have to be doing with their users and partners? Is there more that they should be doing?
Of course, yeah, I think it has to be like much more tangible. And actually, I looked it up before, and that's why I also value this webinar so much, because there doesn't seem to be much information about the topic. And the only guidelines, if we speak about, more from the policy level that could be useful for entrepreneurs, were only found by me in the NHS website. So they had their health innovation networks of NHS develop guidelines together with Plymouth University and Boehringer Ingelheim to talk about trust and give specific recommendations to entrepreneurs. And that's very interesting. So I recommend looking into those. And they say pretty much what we've been discussing here, like, be very upfront. If you're using data, who's going to benefit from your data? If you're going to sell it, who's going to benefit from, the monetary value? But then also, if they're like, which are the risks? You need to communicate the risks. And then, for example, if you have a data leak, like what's going to happen and how you're going to address that. And for entrepreneurs, it's almost like raising money, like fundraising. When you're talking to investors, you need to always consider, so investors will look into the risks that investing into your company incurs, and then you need to address them immediately. So that's pretty much the same, but talking to, patients and your users, addressing the issues of, possible risks with data. Again, I think there is like the big strategy behind that. And for example, if we speak about Oura, if anyone is not aware, Oura is a smart ring that measures your power meters and your sleep. And it's actually a Finnish origins company, but now international unicorn. So they started, of course, as a variable, as a, more of a technology company, but then they've done validations and studies. And during COVID, they've done a study together with University of California that confirmed that Oura can detect COVID on average 3 days before a patient actually tested for COVID. And they published it in Nature Science and so on. So of course, when you communicate it this way, you already build much more trust, and you show an example of how your technology, can be valuable for you and which medical value it has.
Excellent. Now I'm going to go to the Q&A, and I'm going to bring everybody back. Welcome back. It's going to be a fast Q&A. It's going to be a lightning round. Do you believe that regulatory will be easier to enforce with AI? Do you see a future where compliance can be monitored in real time? This is from Martin Sorens. Yes, I'm going to answer this. There's actually new technology now where you can actually get a heat map. So you change your, you can get a heat map of your various compliance risks. And it's when you make a change to your architecture, you make a change to your documentation. I'm gonna give you some more information about that, Martin, later. But the answer is yes. There is technology now. It's kind of more on the legal tech side, not necessarily the health AI side, but there is technology like that coming. And I think I'm going to be doing a demo for that later on this year, in November or December. This is a question for Jacob, and this is from a developer. As a physician, what are the factors you expect patients ask for proving AI proving itself trustworthy? Many physicians dismiss developers from the get-go because of the knowledge gap, and this only widens the gap between the two. How do we as developers solve this?
In order to develop health tech, I need developers, full stop. So if I want to make something that is that serves the population, that adds value, I need developers, and developers need me, and we need each other. We're a team. You've put it in the title, multidisciplinary approach. So with that in mind, I think we can, take that, knowing that everyone has something to offer on the table. And that will lead to better products, well-rounded, and things that everyone can apply. I think the first part of the point, there was a question in that as well, Jose?
What are the factors you feel
Yep.
expect patients ask for AI proving itself trustworthy?
Yeah. So as a physician, I have to advocate for my patients. There will be things that I will not, they may not fully understand or know. There will be procedures, there will be different aspects. So we talked about data right now. You trust me that I am not going to go outside between patient-doctor confidentiality. I'm not going to breach that and say what you have told me in confidence. And yet health data breaches happen. Personal information is released. How does that make you as a patient, as a person feel? So all of these kind of factors as a physician, knowing that if I'm using certain technology, are there encryptions in place? Is there software in place to protect it? Are my users my colleague Tony Marie spoke about biases. There was a 2019 study that especially against African Americans, there was bias against because of AI algorithms. So do we understand that there is going to be biases in these algorithms that I'm knowing? So all of this communicating, transparency and explainability, we should be able to explain that and show that information to our patients. And we have to remember, we're at the beginning of this. So it's going to take a bit of time, but if we do the steps properly, it'll be beneficial for everyone.
I think we're going to have to wrap up. I know we've got a couple of questions. I just want to say, in response to what you said, Jacob, the cybersecurity, I know it's come up a couple of times here, it's getting better. And I'm going to be doing a whole separate event on that. And but I know there's been, you have the early horror stories of prompt hacks and things like that. The technologies that are coming online are the security picture is changing. And that's a bit short. We just run out of time. So I want to thank everybody for coming. I want to get speakers. Can you stay here for a few minutes? I'm going to chuck everyone else out. But do you mind if staying just for 1 or 2 minutes? And I'm going to, and let's see. Kick. Remove. Oh, actually, you know what? It's not going to work. Sorry, guys. We're just going to wrap up here. Sorry about that. I just removed you, haven't you? We're going to wrap up here, and I've got a couple of questions from the audience. I'm going to send you privately. So if you didn't get your question answered today, we'll get you an answer. Thank you much for everybody. You have a lovely day.
Bye.
Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.